The air crackled with static, a low thrumming dissonance that seemed to emanate not from any discernible source, but from the very fabric of reality itself. It was a sound of endings, of empires collapsing into dust, of secrets buried deep beneath the unforgiving earth. Listen closely, for in the silence between the explosions, in the tremor that shakes the very ground beneath your feet, lies a story whispered on the winds of history, a narrative of power, delusion, and the desperate attempt to cling to immortality in the face of utter annihilation. The conventional narrative, the one etched into textbooks and propagated through countless documentaries, paints a picture of finality, a conclusive end to a monstrous regime. We are told of a bunker, a suicide, and a hasty cremation, a final act of defiance aimed at denying the victors the satisfaction of parading a defeated tyrant through the streets. But what if that narrative is incomplete? What if fragments of that dark chapter remain, hidden away in the shadows, refusing to be erased from the collective memory? The official record states that, following the self-inflicted demise of the individual known as A.H. on April 30th, 1945, within the confines of the besieged Reich Chancellery, his remains, along with those of his consort E.B., were subjected to cremation amidst the chaos of the collapsing capital. Soviet forces in the aftermath purportedly recovered charred remains, identifiable only through meticulous dental records. These remains were then subjected to a macabre odyssey, a journey eastward marked by clandestine burials under the cover of darkness, each dawn bringing a renewed exhumation, the cadaverous cargo transported within a mundane ammunition crate. Accompanying the principal figure on this grim pilgrimage were the bodies of his chief propagandist J.G. and his spouse M.G., both participants in a suicide pact. Their remains also partially incinerated. Further compounding the morbid tableau were the intact bodies of the G children, victims of a calculated act of parental filicide carried out within the bunker's suffocating confines. And, completing this procession of death, were the remains of the individual's canine companion, B, along with a canine offspring, and the 2 terriers belonging to E.B. The cumulative remains were ultimately interred beneath a nondescript car park situated behind what subsequently became the headquarters of a particular intelligence agency in East Germany. In 1970, a directive was issued by the then chief of that agency, Y.A., ordering the exhumation, cremation, and subsequent dispersal of the ashes into a local waterway, an act intended to ensure the complete erasure of any physical vestige of the abhorred figure. Thus, according to the accepted account, nothing remains. The book is closed, the chapter ended, the past consigned to the annals of history. But history, as they say, is written by the victors, and the victors often have their own agendas, their own reasons for shaping the narrative to suit their purposes. For years, a different story has been circulating, a story whispered in hushed tones among historians and researchers, a story that suggests that the official narrative is not entirely accurate, that some tangible remnants of that era, some physical components of AH may still exist, secreted away in undisclosed locations within the territory of Germany. The source of these purported remnants, the methods by which they were spirited away from the inferno of Berlin, are shrouded in mystery, their existence corroborated only by veiled allusions from former members of the inner circle, individuals who, for reasons of their own, chose to remain silent for decades. Only now, as the sands of time continue to flow, are they beginning to offer tantalizing glimpses into a hidden truth. To understand this alternative narrative, to embark on this quest for the alleged remnants, we must rewind the clock, returning to those final desperate days of April 1945, to the chaotic heart of Berlin, where the seeds of this enduring enigma were first sown. Berlin, by April 27, 1945, was a city suffocating, strangled by the relentless advance of the Red Army. Soviet forces, like an inexorable tide, were carving their way through the urban landscape, engaging in brutal street-to-street combat, each building a fortress, each doorway a potential killing ground. The German defenders, driven to the brink of desperation, fought with a ferocity born of fanaticism and fear, clinging to every inch of ground, every shattered window, every pile of rubble. By April 28th, the Soviet forces had penetrated the central government district, the very nerve centre of the crumbling Reich. The ministry buildings, once symbols of power and authority, were now engulfed in flames, reduced to skeletal shells by the relentless artillery barrage. Within the confines of the Führerbunker, a subterranean labyrinth of concrete and despair, AH received the grim news. The defence was on the verge of collapse, ammunition was dwindling, the end was nigh. The realisation of impending doom spurred AH to make preparations for his final act, a carefully orchestrated exit designed to maintain a semblance of control even in the face of utter defeat. Shortly after midnight on the morning of April 29th, AH formalised his long-standing relationship with EB in a hastily arranged ceremony within the bunker. The marriage, a belated reward for years of unwavering loyalty, was a symbolic gesture, a final act of commitment in the face of oblivion. Following a perfunctory wedding breakfast, AH dictated his last will and testament to one of his secretaries, TJ. Multiple copies were produced, dispatched via military couriers with instructions to reach Grand Admiral KD, the military commander in the north. The document outlined the framework for a new regime in the aftermath of AH's death, designating D as Reich, President and JG as Reich Chancellor, a desperate attempt to ensure the continuation of the ideology even in the face of military defeat. At approximately 4 a.m. on April 29th, AH retired to his private quarters, seeking a brief respite from the unrelenting pressure. Later that afternoon, AH was informed of the fate of his erstwhile ally, BM, executed by Italian partisans. His body, along with that of his companion, CP, and several other fascist ministers, subjected to public humiliation in Milan before being suspended upside down from a petrol station forecourt. The gruesome spectacle served as a stark reminder of the potential indignities that awaited him should he fall into enemy hands. AH, determined to avoid a similar fate, issued instructions that his body and that of his wife were to be thoroughly incinerated, preventing any potential desecration by the advancing Soviet forces. To this end, a message was dispatched to the underground Reich Chancellery garage. EK, AH's chief driver, was ordered to gather a sufficient quantity of fuel in jerry cans and stockpile them near the bunker's emergency exit. K and his men accomplished this task by siphoning fuel from the numerous Mercedes-Benz limousines rendered immobile within the damaged garage, a testament to the waste and futility of the regime's ambitions. AH, still meticulously planning his departure, sought to ensure the efficacy of the cyanide capsules provided to him by HH, who had recently fallen from grace after engaging in secret negotiations with the Western Allies. To this end, AH's beloved Alsatian, B, was subjected to a lethal dose of cyanide within the bunker's lavatories, a grim test of the poison's potency, a final act of control over life and death. At 1 a.m. on April 30th, Field Marshal W.K., the head of the German armed forces, reported to AH that all attempts to relieve Berlin had failed. The situation was irretrievable. The end was imminent. At 2:30 a.m., AH and EB bid farewell to their loyal staff and retreated to their private rooms, a final moment of intimacy before the inevitable. By late morning, AH hosted a final situation meeting with General H.W., the Berlin Defense Commandant. W painted a bleak picture. Soviet troops were within 500 meters of the bunker, preparing to launch an assault on the Reich Chancellery complex. The German defenders were on the verge of running out of ammunition. The wider Berlin defences were unlikely to last beyond 24 hours. W requested permission for the remaining German forces to attempt a breakout to the west, a desperate gamble to escape the encroaching Soviet encirclement. AH remained non-committal, offering no immediate response. W departed to return to his command post. However, at 1 p.m, AH relented, granting permission for a breakout to be attempted that night, a tacit acknowledgement of the futility of further resistance. AH partook in a final lunch with his wife, secretaries and cook, then bid farewell to his remaining staff, including G and B. At 2:30 p.m, AH and EB entered AH's study and closed the door, sealing their fate. OG AH's adjutant stood guard outside, awaiting the inevitable signal. After a period of tense anticipation, a gunshot reverberated through the bunker. HLAH's valet entered the room, discovering a scene of death and despair. While eyewitness accounts varied in their details, the essential facts remained consistent. AH had seemingly taken his own life. A bullet wound was evident in his right temple. Blood stained the arm of the sofa and pooled on the carpet. EB had ingested poison, her face contorted in the characteristic rictus of cyanide poisoning. 3 pistols were present in the room, AH's Walther PPK lying on the floor, EB's PPK remaining unused on a table. The air was thick with the acrid scent of bitter almonds, the telltale sign of cyanide. G informed the bunker occupants that the Führer was dead, the news spreading like wildfire through the claustrophobic confines of the subterranean complex. Several members of the staff viewed the bodies, including AA, the leader of the Hitler Youth, who had grown close to AH in the final months. AA had been formulating plans for a clandestine network of Hitler Youth leaders to operate underground, preserving the ideology in the aftermath of Germany's inevitable surrender. HR, the head of AHES bodyguard unit, stated that AA had taken AHE's Walther PP pistol as a souvenir, intending to preserve it for a future generation. AA viewed the pistol as a talismanic relic, a tangible symbol of the fallen regime, a symbol to be preserved for the future. According to various witness accounts, the bodies of AH and EB were wrapped in blankets and carried up the bunker's emergency exit staircase, emerging into the bomb-ravaged Reich Chancellery Garden. A temporary lull in the Soviet shelling allowed the corpses to be placed in a shallow shell crater. The petrol, transported from the Reich Chancellery garage, was poured over the bodies, saturating the muddy ground. A roll of papers was ignited and thrown into the crater, igniting the petrol. The gathered spectators retreated to the emergency exit, offering a final salute until forced back underground by renewed shelling. Bodyguards were dispatched to monitor the progress of the cremation, adding more fuel to the fire as needed. The staff faced significant challenges in their attempt to completely destroy the remains. The open-air cremation was inefficient. The heat distribution was uneven due to wind and the shape of the crater. The sandy soil of Berlin absorbed much of the petrol, hindering the incineration process. The SS reported that the cremation lasted approximately 2.5 hours, after which earth was shoveled over the remains in an attempt to disguise the site. Witnesses reported that the corpses were blackened and burned, some extremities remaining recognizable. It is at this point that the narrative takes an unexpected turn, the accepted account diverging from the whispers that have persisted for decades. During the cremation, or possibly during the subsequent burial, ashes were allegedly collected from AH's corpse and placed inside a small metal box, a detail not widely known, but mentioned by some of the bunker occupants and in post-war interrogations. The box was purportedly given to AA, the leader of the Hitler Youth. The rationale behind entrusting the box to AA stems from his close relationship with AH in the final days. AA had moved his headquarters to Wilhelmstrasse 64, opposite the Führer bunker. AA, who had lost an arm in combat on the Eastern Front, had received 2 decorations from AH, the Iron Cross First Class and the Gold Cross of the German Order, a testament to the esteem in which AH held the Hitler Youth leader. A few days before the end, AH had a private meeting with AA, intimating that the ideology would survive his demise through the next generation of young adherents. AA had been actively creating an underground organisation to ensure the continuation of the movement in the post-war era. AA represented the future of the ideology, a living link between AH and the new generation. One of those who corroborated the existence of the ashes and their transfer to AA was TJ, AH's secretary, during an interrogation on August 30th, 1946 in Garmisch-Partenkirchen by the United States Army's Counterintelligence Corps. J stated, unsolicited, that she knew that AA had taken ashes. Her statement read, "I know from hearsay that AHIS ashes were collected into a box which was given to Reichsjugendführer AA. About the further fate of AA, I do not know. I saw him for the last time on the 2nd of May when I left the Reich Chancellery." At the time of JS' statement, OG, AH's adjutant, was in captivity in Moscow. Soviet forces had stormed the Reich Chancellery and Führerbunker on May 2nd, 1945, finding the buildings largely deserted, as the remaining occupants had attempted a breakout on the evening of May 1st. The Soviets quickly discovered the partially cremated corpses of JG, and his wife MGJG had assumed control in Berlin after AHES' death, attempting to negotiate a ceasefire with the Soviets. When these attempts failed, he fatally shot his wife in the Reich Chancellery garden before taking his own life. His adjutant, GS, supervised the cremation of the bodies. The Soviets also recovered the bodies of the G children, who had been poisoned with cyanide capsules. Vice Admiral H.V. AHS Naval Adjutant was compelled to identify the bodies and assist in locating AHS corpse. The Soviets fueled rumours that AH had escaped from Berlin by not publicly acknowledging the discovery and identification of the burned corpses of AH and EB, suppressing autopsy reports and dental identification records until long after the war in 1968. In overall, command of the 10 planned breakout groups from the Führerbunker and Reich Chancellery was SS Brigadeführer W.M., who commanded the 5,000 troops defending the government district. AA was initially assigned to Group Number 4 but became separated and joined Group Number 3. This group included HB, AHS Chief Pilot, BG, the Second Pilot, S, GS Adjutant, R, GS Chauffeur, and Dr. LS, an SS Surgeon. Also in the group was MB. AA faced many challenges escaping Berlin, including witnessing the apparent death of MB and Dr. S in the street. However, the ultimate fate of MB remains a separate narrative. AA was fortunate to evade capture, as most members of his escape group were apprehended. He claimed in his 1995 autobiography that he intended to reach Grand Admiral DS' new government in the north. AA also asserted that he had buried AH's Walter PP pistol beneath Berlin's Zankruge Bridge, a claim disputed by OG, who stated that AA retained the gun as a memento. G added that AAS family might still possess the weapon, implying that it could be of considerable value. AA seemed better prepared for his escape than many other Nazi leaders, possessing false identity papers. This suggests a premeditated plan for the post-war continuation of the movement, operating underground under the Allied occupation. This plan would influence his movements throughout Germany in 1945. HTR, a British military intelligence officer commissioned to investigate AHS death in 1945, interviewed several witnesses who had escaped to the West. In 1947, he commented on the Ashes story, stating, "It would have been a logical act to pass on the sacred relics to the next generation." TR believed that AA left the bunker with AH's suicide pistol and potentially with a box containing AH's ashes. TR reiterated this opinion in 1951, stating, "If I were to hazard a guess, I should guess that the ashes were given to AA." This sentiment was echoed by AB in his biography of AH, Hitler, A Study in Tyranny, in 1962, stating that some evidence supported this theory. JPO, a US Army intelligence officer in 1945, wrote in his 1978 book, The Bunker, that AA was suspected of being a keeper of the flames, possibly even the custodian of AH's ashes. A declassified CIA document from 2007 also referenced this narrative, stating, "It would have been a logical act to pass on the sacred relics to the next generation, the sacred relics potentially being the ashes and the pistol used in the suicide." What, then, was AA's plan? In March and April 1945, AA held meetings with senior Hitler Youth staff. The Hitler Youth Leadership headquarters was relocated from Berlin to the Hitler Youth Training School in Bad Tolz, Bavaria. AA's plan involved 35,000 adult leaders from the Hitler Youth moving into inaccessible mountainous regions in Bavaria, Austria, and Bohemia. They would maintain an underground organization and conduct guerrilla-style attacks on Allied occupation forces. AA dispatched couriers to various parts of Germany, instructing Hitler Youth leaders to withdraw to the south. These leaders included Es in the north, EO in the west, HW in the southeast, and GR in Austria and Bohemia. Weapons and supplies were intended to come from the army. This order resulted in limited attacks on the Allies after the war, known as werewolf attacks. A was AA's main point of contact with the other leaders. AA escaped from Berlin carrying false papers under the name EZ. He lodged with a farmer's wife in the village of Lantzen, Mecklenburg, remaining there until autumn 1945. He decided to move west to the US occupation zone, assisted by the local mayor, who provided him with food and money in exchange for delivering a message to the mayor's daughter. AA returned to Soviet-occupied Berlin and took a train to Braunschweig. He then walked and took a coach to Gelsenkirchen, moving north to Lübeck. AA contacted a former senior leader in the League of German Girls and met a former staff member, GM. Travelling with members of the mayor's family to Hornsberg, he re-entered Soviet territory, returning to Mecklenburg and Lantzen to exchange more messages with the mayor. Completing this task, AA travelled west again. In December 1945, he met two more senior Hitler Youth leaders from his personal staff. He then travelled to Munich and visited his mother in Oberstaufen. In Oberstaufen he met me again, along with another leader named A. They travelled to northern Germany. However, AS partner, who was working as an informant for the US Counterintelligence Corps, tipped off the Americans to AS' presence. On December 15th, 1945, AA was arrested and taken to Kempten for questioning. The Americans were naturally interested in the details of AH's death and the possible fate of MB. They also inquired about AH's ashes, a rumour already circulating that AA had carried them out of Berlin. Subsequent confirmation of this rumour came from other senior Nazi figures, such as TJAA claimed to have no knowledge of the ultimate disposal of AH and EBS bodies, maintaining this position until his death in 1996. AA wrote, "Later on, it could be read in the newspaper that they had passed AH's ashes in a metal container to me. This is speculation and not true." After a trial in 1949, AA was sentenced to 3 years and 3 months imprisonment as a major offender. However, there was no evidence of his involvement in war crimes. In 1958, AA was fined 35,000 marks after a court in West Germany found him guilty of indoctrinating German youth. He worked as a salesman in West Germany and lived in Gran Canaria from 1971 to 1976, then in West Berlin. He maintained a friendship with AHOS pilot HB, who had been released from Soviet captivity in 1955 and from whom details of the fate of AHOS ashes emerged. In post-war Germany, surviving members of AH's inner circle remained in contact, including B, some of AH's secretaries, and his adjutants. G and L, B and AA remained in contact after the war, though AA did not associate with the others. The central question remains, what became of the box of ashes that many of AH's inner circle believed AA carried out of Berlin in May 1945? The fate of AH's ashes was revealed by HB, who became friends with AA after the war. B recounted that AA buried a portion of AH's ashes in an existing grave in southern Germany. If B's testimony is accurate, some of AH's physical remains still exist in Germany today. However, the code of silence surrounding the grave's location and the passing of all members of Reich's inner circle make definitively proving or disproving this story impossible. Nevertheless, the evidence presented, the beliefs of inner circle Nazis, and the skepticism of historians and interrogators, coupled with AA's denial, make for a compelling narrative. AA died in Berlin in October 1996, aged 83, as the last surviving minister who had served AH. The implications of this narrative, however speculative, are profound. The idea that even a fragment of AH still exists secreted away in the German soil challenges the accepted notion of a clean break from the past. It suggests that the shadows of that era continue to linger, refusing to be fully banished. If the story is true, the choice of location for the burial is undoubtedly significant. Southern Germany, particularly Bavaria, held a special significance for the Nazi movement. It was in Munich that AH first rose to prominence. It was in Bavaria that the Nazi Party established its headquarters. The region was a stronghold of Nazi ideology, a fertile ground for the propagation of its hateful doctrines. Furthermore, the act of interring the ashes in an existing grave adds another layer of complexity to the narrative. It suggests a desire to conceal the remains, to blend them into the landscape, to make them indistinguishable from the countless other graves that dot the German countryside. It speaks to a fear of discovery, a fear of the consequences that would ensue if the truth were to be revealed. The identity of the individual in whose grave the ashes were buried is also a matter of speculation. Was it a loyal follower, a dedicated party member, someone who would have considered it an honour to share their final resting place with a piece of the Führer? Or was it a more anonymous figure, someone whose grave was simply chosen for its obscurity, its lack of prominence? The answers to these questions remain elusive, lost to the passage of time and the deliberate obfuscation of those who possessed the knowledge. The code of silence that surrounded this secret, the unwavering loyalty of those who were privy to the truth, ensured that the location of the grave remained hidden for decades. Even as the post-war generation sought to confront the horrors of the past, to grapple with the legacy of the Nazi regime, this particular secret remained buried, a testament to the enduring power of ideology and the enduring capacity for human beings to protect those they deem worthy, even in the face of overwhelming evidence of their wrongdoing. The failure of AA to reveal the location of the grave, even in his later years, suggests a deep-seated commitment to preserving the secret. Whether this commitment stemmed from a genuine belief in the righteousness of the cause, or from a fear of the repercussions that would follow if he were to betray the trust of his comrades, is impossible to say with certainty. However, his silence speaks volumes, highlighting the enduring nature of the bonds forged in the crucible of war and ideological fervour. The role of HB in revealing the existence of the ashes is also noteworthy. As AHES former pilot, B was a close confidant of the Nazi leadership. He was privy to many secrets, many clandestine operations. His decision to share this particular piece of information, years after the war, suggests a complex mix of motives. Perhaps he felt a sense of responsibility to reveal the truth, to shed light on a hidden chapter of history. Or perhaps he was simply seeking to capitalize on the notoriety of the story, to gain attention and recognition in his later years. Whatever his reasons, BS testimony provides a crucial piece of the puzzle, offering a tantalizing glimpse into the clandestine world of the post-war Nazi underground. The skepticism of historians and interrogators towards the story of the ashes is understandable. The lack of concrete evidence, the reliance on anecdotal accounts, makes it difficult to verify the claims with certainty. Furthermore, the inherent unreliability of eyewitness testimony, particularly in the context of traumatic events, adds another layer of complexity to the task of historical reconstruction. However, the persistence of the rumours, the consistency of the accounts offered by various individuals, suggests that there may be more to the story than meets the eye. The very act of denying the existence of the ashes as AA did, can be interpreted as a tacit admission of their existence. By vehemently rejecting the claim, AA drew attention to the issue, fueling speculation and suspicion. Had he simply ignored the rumours, they might have faded away over time, but his denial served to keep the story alive, ensuring that it continued to circulate among historians and researchers. The absence of any official investigation into the matter is also significant. Despite the widespread rumours, despite the testimony of credible witnesses, no serious attempt was ever made to locate the grave, to exhume the remains, to definitively confirm or deny the existence of the ashes. This lack of action may have been due to a number of factors, including a desire to avoid further controversy, a reluctance to disturb the dead, or a simple lack of resources. However, it also suggests a degree of ambivalence towards the story, a sense that perhaps it was better to let the past remain buried, to avoid reopening old wounds. The legacy of the Nazi regime continues to haunt Germany to this day. The country has made significant strides in confronting its past, in acknowledging the horrors of the Holocaust and the atrocities committed during the war. However, the shadows of that era still linger, reminding us of the fragility of democracy and the ever-present danger of extremism. The story of AH's ashes, whether true or not, serves as a potent symbol of this enduring legacy. It reminds us that the past is never truly dead, that it continues to shape the present and influence the future. It challenges us to remain vigilant, to resist the forces of hatred and intolerance, to ensure that the horrors of the Nazi regime are never repeated. The quest for AH's ashes, the search for a tangible link to the past, is ultimately a quest for understanding. It is an attempt to grapple with the complexities of history, to make sense of the senseless, to learn from the mistakes of previous generations. It is a reminder that the pursuit of truth, however elusive, is a moral imperative, a duty that we owe to ourselves and to future generations. The answer to the question of whether AH's ashes still exist may never be definitively known. The truth may remain buried, lost to the passage of time and the deliberate obfuscation of those who sought to conceal it. However, the very act of asking the question, of pursuing the truth, is itself a valuable exercise. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable realities of the past, to grapple with the complexities of human nature, to reflect on the lessons of history. And in the end, that may be the most important thing of all. The whispers of oblivion may never be silenced, but by listening closely, by seeking to understand, we can hope to learn from the past and build a better future. The significance of AA's role in this entire saga cannot be overstated. He was in many ways the embodiment of the Nazi future, the leader entrusted with carrying the torch of ideology into the post-war world. His youth, his charisma, and his unwavering commitment to the cause made him the ideal candidate to lead the underground resistance movement, to preserve the flame of Nazism in the face of Allied occupation. The fact that AH entrusted him with the alleged ashes is a testament to the importance he placed on ALS' role in the future of the movement. It was a symbolic gesture, a passing of the baton, a reaffirmation that the ideology would endure even in the face of defeat. AS' subsequent actions, his attempts to organize the underground resistance, his efforts to evade capture, his silence regarding the ashes, all suggest a deep-seated commitment to fulfilling this role. He was a true believer, a man who dedicated his life to the cause, even after it had become clear that the cause was lost. The contradictions inherent in AA's character are also worth noting. He was a decorated war hero, a man who had suffered significant physical hardship in the service of his country. Yet he was also a key figure in a regime that was responsible for the deaths of millions of innocent people. He was a leader of youth, a man who was entrusted with the responsibility of shaping the minds of future generations. Yet he used his position to indoctrinate young people with hateful ideologies, to prepare them for a life of violence and extremism. These contradictions reflect the complexities of the Nazi regime, the way in which it was able to attract individuals from all walks of life, to exploit their patriotism, their idealism, their ambition, for its own nefarious purposes. The story of AA's life is a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of extremism and the importance of critical thinking. It is a reminder that even the most charismatic leaders can be wrong, that even the most deeply held beliefs can be misguided. It is a reminder that we must always be vigilant, always be prepared to challenge authority, always be willing to question the status quo. The enduring mystery surrounding AH's ashes serves as a metaphor for the enduring mystery of the Nazi regime itself. Despite decades of research, despite countless books and documentaries, despite the efforts of historians and scholars from around the world, there are still many unanswered questions about the rise and fall of the Third Reich. How could such a hateful ideology have gained such widespread support? How could a civilized nation have descended into such barbarity? How could so many people have been complicit in such horrific crimes? These questions continue to haunt us, to challenge our understanding of human nature, to force us to confront the darkest aspects of our past. The search for AH's ashes, the attempt to locate a tangible link to that dark chapter of history, is ultimately a search for answers to these questions. It is an attempt to understand the forces that shape the Nazi regime, to learn from its mistakes, to prevent such atrocities from ever happening again. The legacy of the Nazi regime is not just a German legacy, it is a global legacy. It is a reminder that the forces of hatred and intolerance can emerge anywhere, that they must be confronted wherever they appear. It is a reminder that democracy is fragile, that it must be defended at all costs. The story of AH's ashes, the whispers of oblivion, is a story that must be told and retold, so that future generations will never forget the lessons of the past. The details surrounding the alleged burial of AH's ashes within an existing grave raise further compelling questions. Who was this person? Were they a loyal follower, someone who explicitly requested such an arrangement, or an unknowing participant in this clandestine act? The answer remains lost to time, adding to the intrigue and moral ambiguity of the narrative. If the individual was aware and consenting, it speaks to the depth of fanaticism and devotion within the Nazi ranks, a willingness to sacrifice even one's final resting place in service of the ideology. It paints a picture of unwavering loyalty, even in the face of utter defeat and moral bankruptcy. Conversely, if the individual was unaware, it represents a profound violation, a desecration of their memory and their final resting place. It transforms their grave into a symbol of the regime's arrogance and disregard for basic human decency, a further indictment of its moral depravity. Regardless of the circumstances, the act of interring AH's ashes in another person's grave is a powerful symbol of the Nazi regime's attempt to infiltrate and corrupt every aspect of German society, even its cemeteries. It suggests a desire to merge the identity of the regime with the collective memory of the nation, to ensure that its legacy would endure for generations to come, regardless of the truth. The location of the grave itself also holds significance. Was it a prominent location, easily accessible to pilgrims and devotees, or a secluded, obscure spot, chosen for its anonymity and the reduced risk of discovery? The choice of location would reflect the intentions of those who carried out the burial, whether they sought to create a shrine, a place of pilgrimage for future generations of Nazis, or simply to conceal the remains and prevent their desecration by Allied forces. The fact that the location has remained secret for so long suggests a high degree of planning and discretion on the part of those involved. It speaks to the existence of a well-organized network of loyal followers, committed to protecting the secret and ensuring that the location would not be revealed, even under duress. This network, likely comprised of former members of the SS and other Nazi organizations, would have operated in the shadows, maintaining a code of silence and a deep-seated distrust of outsiders. Their actions demonstrate the enduring power of ideology and the lengths to which people will go to protect their beliefs, even in the face of overwhelming opposition. The story of AH's ashes is ultimately a story about memory, about how we remember the past and how we choose to forget. It is a story about the power of symbols and the ways in which they can be used to shape our understanding of history. It is a story about the enduring legacy of the Nazi regime and its continued